So picture this. You're at like a crowded party. The music is, just a little too loud. People are talking over each other in a dozen different
Oh
conversations.
yeah, it's just total sensory overload.
Exactly. And then you lock eyes with someone across the room, and it's not a stranger. It's someone you've known for a while, like a friend.
Right.
You share a look, maybe, I don't know, a lingering laugh over an inside joke nobody else heard, and suddenly you're hit with this nerve-wracking, stomach-dropping thought, like, wait, are we both feeling this?
Oh, it is a universally terrifying moment. I mean,
Sure.
you are standing on the precipice of a completely unknown dynamic. Everything you thought you knew about your relationship with this person is suddenly thrown into question by, well, a single glance.
So we're dedicating this deep dive to decoding that exact feeling and everything that comes after it. We've pulled together an incredibly diverse stack of sources to figure out the entire life cycle of romantic vulnerability.
We have. We're looking at clinical psychology journals, relationship coaching guides, hard data from dating polls, and even some encyclopedic overviews of human behavior.
Right, so the mission here is to help you, the listener, identify real mutual attraction, figure out how to navigate the terrifying leap of actually confessing your feelings, and then, handle the aftermath.
Yeah, whether that leads to a cinematic romance or the painful, complex waters of unrequited love.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get straight into that very first stage, the spark. When you have that stomach-dropping moment at the party, how do you know you aren't just, like, making it all up in your head?
Well, the human brain is incredibly skilled at seeing patterns that do not exist, especially when we desperately want them to. So if we look at the insights gathered from our sources like marriage.com, the absolute defining line between imagined chemistry and genuine unspoken attraction is reciprocity.
Reciprocity. So we aren't talking about isolated, fleeting moments.
Right, exactly. A single intense conversation over drinks does not equal mutual attraction.
Hmm.
You have to look for consistent, repeated patterns of reciprocal behavior over time.
Because, I mean, anyone can have a weirdly deep chat at 1 in the morning, right?
Cool.
You really need to see if that energy translates to, like, a random Tuesday afternoon coffee. The sources actually point out very specific subconscious behavioral cues to look for. And one of the most prominent is behavioral mirroring.
Yeah, so what you are observing with behavioral mirroring is two autonomic nervous systems essentially syncing up. Like if you lean in across the table, they lean in.
If you take a sip of your drink, they reach for theirs.
Exactly. It's a biological bonding mechanism. We do it unconsciously to signal safety and alignment with the other person. And another major biological indicator is selective attention.
Oh, right, like that loud, crowded party we mentioned earlier.
Yes. When two people are mutually attracted, their peripheral awareness literally drops. Psychologists have found that the human brain naturally prioritizes stimuli carrying high emotional significance.
So the background noise, the other conversations, it all just literally fades away in your cognitive processing.
It does. It really does.
And then there are the physical reactions that betray us completely, like blushing. I mean, you can control what you say, but you cannot control the blood rushing to your face.
Right, because blushing happens when we feel emotionally exposed. If someone is complimenting you or you're holding prolonged eye contact and you both get that uncontrollable flush, well, that is your body communicating what your words are too afraid to say.
But wait, we have to take a step back and ask a more fundamental question here. Like, why are we drawn to these specific people in the first place? Why do we suddenly catch feelings for a friend?
That is a great question. The psychological frameworks provided in our sources offer some really fascinating explanations for that. The matching hypothesis is a foundational one.
Right, which suggests that while we might all idealize someone incredibly objectively attractive, we naturally gravitate toward people who match our own perceived level of attractiveness.
Exactly. And the underlying mechanism here is self-preservation. We want to minimize the statistical risk of rejection.
But I see people completely defy that hypothesis all the time. Like, people punch above their weight constantly. Social psychologist Roy Baumeister calls this concept falling upward, where we fall for someone who seems totally out of our league.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
So how does the psychology explain that massive risk?
Well, that behavior is explained by the self-expansion model. This model operates on the premise that our core human motivation is to continually expand our own identity. We want to increase our cognitive complexity, our social influence, our understanding of the world.
Oh, wow. So when we fall in love, we are engaging in a process psychologists call the inclusion of the other in the self?
Exactly. We literally want to absorb their traits, their social circles, and their resources into our own identity.
Like how you start listening to obscure indie music just because they like it.
Right. Or you adopt their mannerisms, you take an interest in their hobbies. You are expanding who you are. So if the potential reward of that self-expansion is high enough, if this person has traits you deeply admire or desire, you will risk falling for someone out of your league.
The biological drive to expand just overrides the fear of rejection. That makes so much sense. But, trying to read all of these cues feels like being a submarine navigating in pitch black water.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
You send out a sonar ping, like a lingering look, a subtle touch on the arm, a text that is just a little too flirty.
And if you only get an echo of your own ping bouncing off a cold wall, well, you know you are alone in the water. It's entirely one-sided.
But if another, different ping comes back at you from the dark, you know you have a real connection. There is someone else out there looking for you.
Yeah, and once you realize those sonar pings are mutual, or you have gathered enough behavioral evidence to strongly suspect they are, you hit a terrifying crossroads. You have to make a choice. Do you surface and make contact, or do you stay safely in the dark?
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I have to push back on the idea that surfacing is the default right move. A lot of people would argue that if you have an amazing dynamic with a friend, you should just keep your mouth shut.
Really? Why is that?
Well, why blow up a stable, loving friendship for a romantic relationship that, statistically speaking, will probably fail?
That tension is exactly what a recent poll by Boo, which is a personality-based dating app, sought to measure. They asked the community the ultimate question. Would you choose to stay friends, or would you risk heartbreak by confessing your feelings?
And I bet the answers were pretty split.
Massively split. The data reveals a huge divide based entirely on neurological personality profiles. Like 56 to 68% of introverts surveyed prefer to maintain the status quo. They want to safeguard the friendship above all else.
Which makes sense, right? Introverts are highly sensitive to social disruption. Their nervous systems operate at a higher baseline of arousal.
Right, meaning they don't need a lot of external stimuli to feel overwhelmed.
Exactly. So blowing up a friendship is a massive spike in social anxiety for them. But the extroverts in the poll operated completely differently, didn't they?
Oh, totally. Only 35 to 48% of extroverts chose to keep quiet. Extroverts are neurochemically wired to seek out dopamine rewards. They are far more audacious and willing to risk the stability of the friendship for the high-reward scenario of romantic love.
They will just roll the dice.
They really will.
I mean, we are dealing with two completely different categories of love here. Friendship love is anchored in stability, unconditional loyalty, and shared history. It's like a safe harbor.
And romantic love is driven by passion, intensity, and a certain level of necessary volatility.
Right. So transitioning from that safe harbor into the volatile waters of romance is a multi-step minefield.
It is. The relationship models we reviewed outline this progression very clearly. A connection moves from acquaintance to awareness, and then hits the critical bottleneck, which is the alignment of expectations.
So if the expectations do not align, like if one person wants a casual fling and the other wants a soulmate, the transition violently stalls out.
Exactly. But if they do align, you can progress into mutual understanding, then commitment, and finally, true intimacy.
But going back to addressing my earlier point about whether it is smarter to just stay friends and suppress the romantic feelings, clinically speaking, bottling up intense emotions is a pretty destructive strategy, isn't it?
It really is. People think they are being noble by keeping quiet, but it usually just breeds resentment.
Yeah, you start getting annoyed when they date other people, even though you technically have no right to be.
Right, and suppressing those feelings inevitably leads to inauthenticity. You cease to be a true friend because you're deliberately hiding a massive part of your reality from them.
You're just operating under false pretenses at that point.
Precisely. The friendship is already altered the moment you catch feelings. The only way forward is through. But taking that leap requires a significant amount of emotional maturity.
Right, you cannot just corner them and blurt it out recklessly.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of being vulnerable. How do you communicate this massive shift in your internal world without making the other person feel like they have just been ambushed?
I get the idea of being honest, but there is a very thin line between sharing your feelings and making your anxiety their problem.
Oh, absolutely. Psychotherapeutic counselor Sandra Harewood provides a brilliant framework for this. She draws a hard line between emotional honesty and emotional venting.
Venting being just like a reactive dump of raw emotion.
Yes, it is saying, I am an anxious wreck because I am so in love with you and I can't sleep. That places the burden of your emotional state entirely on the other person.
You are basically demanding they fix it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
To avoid this, Harewood introduces a psychological tool called disidentification.
Disidentification. Okay, what is that exactly?
This is the practice of acknowledging an emotion without letting it consume your core identity. Instead of identifying as the emotion like saying, I am an anxious wreck, you frame it as something you are currently experiencing.
Oh, so you say something like, I have nervousness about sharing this, but I am not my nervousness.
Exactly. It creates space for conscious choice rather than reactive dumping.
It is kind of like handing someone a really heavy package. If you just walk up and drop a 40-pound box on them while they are looking at their phone, well, you're going to cause a problem.
You crush their toes. They are entirely unprepared for the weight.
Right, so you have to get their attention first. You make sure they have their hands out, and you gently transfer the weight over so they have a few seconds to adjust their posture and brace for it. You do not just drop it.
That is a perfect way to put it. The one-tip guide provides the practical steps for handing over that package safely.
What do they suggest?
Well, first, you choose a quiet, neutral setting where neither of you feels trapped. You communicate using I statements, focusing on your internal experience rather than their actions.
Okay, so you explain rather than justify.
Yes, you avoid justifying your feelings or getting defensive. And the most crucial step, you explicitly state that they do not need to give you an answer right away.
That is huge. You're simply providing them with new information about your dynamic. You hand over the package and you step back.
Exactly.
But does this emotional transfer look the same for everyone? The research we pulled from the Cyprus-Turkish Journal of Psychiatry and Psychology dives into social penetration theory, which completely changes how we view vulnerability.
Yes, social penetration theory is essentially the onion model of human connection. We all have superficial outer layers, like our music tastes or our career details.
Right, and beneath those are vulnerable core layers, like our deepest fears, our insecurities, our romantic desires.
Exactly. And the journal highlights fascinating gender differences in why we peel back these layers. The research indicates that women frequently use self-disclosure as a mechanism to process negative feelings and actively seek a structural change in the relationship dynamic.
So they peel the onion to resolve a conflict or shift the status quo.
Right. While men tend to use disclosure differently. The data shows men often use vulnerability to enhance already positive feelings or to build camaraderie, rather than to instigate a structural change.
That is super interesting. But regardless of the gendered motivations, the journal is absolute on one point. Peeling back those core layers is universally mandatory for true intimacy.
You just cannot bypass the risk.
So you take the risk, you peel back the layer, you hand them the heavy package. What happens if they just stare at you, set the package on the floor, and act completely normal?
Oh man, we hear about this scenario all the time from the Questions in Zane blog. It's a highly uncomfortable gray area. You pour your heart out, and the next day they text you a meme as if nothing happened.
So what is the psychological advice for that immediate aftermath? Because that feels awful.
It is actually counterintuitive. You actually go with the flow temporarily.
Wait, really? You just pretend the most terrifying moment of your life didn't just happen.
Only for a very brief window.
Yeah.
You have to recognize that your confession may have triggered a stress response in them, and they might be in a state of cognitive overload.
Ah, I see. They literally just need time to process this massive influx of new data about your relationship.
Exactly. Giving them a few days of normalcy allows their nervous system to regulate. However, you do not let it vanish into the ether. You have to revisit it gently within a few days.
So you say something like, hey, I wanted to circle back to what I shared the other day. I know it was a lot, but is there a reason we haven't talked about it?
Right. And if they still refuse to acknowledge it, after you explicitly bring it back to the table, you are no longer dealing with processing time. You are dealing with a boundary violation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you must clearly express how their avoidance is impacting your self-worth. You state, it hurts that you will not be honest with me. I took a massive risk by telling you how I feel, and I deserve clarity on where you stand.
And if they continue to deflect?
Then their silence is your answer. It is a stark indicator of their emotional maturity or lack thereof.
Which brings us to the scenario we all dread the most. What if they open the package, look inside, and clearly say, no thank you? That plunges us into the harshest but most universally human experience. Rejection.
Unrequited love is agonizing.
It is a profound psychological pain, but our culture has a blind spot here, don't you think?
How do you mean?
Well, we dedicate endless songs and movies to the pain of the person who is rejected, but we rarely examine the psychology of the person doing the rejecting.
That is very true.
The sources led me to Sigmund Freud's writings on this, and it completely reframes the narrative. The rejecter is often dealing with intense emotional turmoil of their own.
Oh, definitely. Freud noted that having to refuse someone who is suing for your love, especially someone you care about platonically, is a deeply distressing role to play.
Yeah, the rejecter is thrust into the role of the villain completely against their will.
Right, and they experience profound guilt for causing pain to a friend, intense anxiety about the shifting social dynamics, and frustration at having their own boundaries tested.
The rejection basically shatters the comfort of the dynamic for both individuals, not just the one who confessed.
It does. That being said, the person who is rejected is still the one in acute agonizing pain. Biological anthropologist Helen Fisher has conducted groundbreaking functional MRI studies on the brains of people experiencing romantic rejection.
And that led to the addiction theory of romantic love, right?
Yes, Fisher's scans reveal that being rejected by someone you love is neurologically identical to going through withdrawal from a highly addictive substance like cocaine.
That is wild.
It is. When you're infatuated with someone, your brain's reward system, specifically the ventral tegmental area, is flooded with dopamine every time you see them or text them.
So they literally become your chemical supply.
Exactly. And when they reject you, that dopamine supply is violently cut off. The profound despair and obsessive thinking you experience are literal neurochemical cravings.
So this is why the clinical remedy for a broken heart is to treat it exactly like breaking a substance addiction.
Yes, you have to remove the stimuli. You must delete the photos, pack away the gifts, and initiate a period of strict no contact. You have to starve the dopamine receptors so they can begin to downregulate to a normal baseline.
Which means the classic line, "Can we still be friends?" is a terrible idea in the immediate aftermath.
The worst idea.
You cannot hang out with your dealer when you are trying to get clean. The WikiHow guide in our sources offers some brutal but highly practical steps for navigating this.
And step one is simply allowing yourself to grieve, right?
Yes, you have to mourn the loss of the potential future you imagined.
And the experts insist on a significant time buffer. They recommend waiting a minimum of 6 to 12 months before even attempting to interact platonically again.
Wow, 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, this is not an arbitrary timeline. 6 to 12 months is the biological time frame required for your brain chemistry to actually reset and for the acute withdrawal symptoms to fully subside.
So what does this all mean for you? I look at this process like physical rehab. If you severely sprain your ankle, you do not instantly try to run a marathon on it the next day.
No, you immobilize it, you ice it.
Right. And when you finally start using it again months later, you do tiny, slow exercises to rebuild the strength. You don't just jump right back into a high-stakes one-on-one dinner with the person who just broke your heart.
Exactly. When you do initiate contact after that 6 to 12-month period, you must structure the environment for safety. You start in group settings.
Like going to play mini golf with mutual friends.
Yeah, or you go to an arcade.
Yeah.
You introduce an external activity so that you are not just staring at each other across a dimly lit table, buckling under the weight of the rejection.
But before you even send the, "Hey, it's been a while" text, there is an absolute golden rule you have to pass. It is the ulterior motive test.
Oh, this is so important.
You have to sit down and be brutally honest with yourself. Are you reaching out because you genuinely miss their platonic friendship? Or are you reaching out because you secretly hope the time apart made them change their mind?
Right, and the ultimate litmus test for your readiness is this. Visualize them happily walking into a room, holding hands with a new romantic partner. Would that sight crush you?
Ooh.
Would it send you spiraling back into despair? If the answer is yes, you are still actively in withdrawal. You are not ready for a platonic friendship.
Because true friendship requires the capacity to support their happiness, even when it explicitly excludes you romantically.
Navigating the life cycle of romantic vulnerability is wildly complex, from interpreting those first sonar pings at a party to doing the grueling emotional rehab of a rejection.
But here is the major takeaway for you listening right now. Whether your confession leads to that movie magic kiss, or it leads to a painful year of distance and resetting boundaries, the mere act of being vulnerable is a massive victory. You stood up, you identified your feelings, you communicated them honestly, and you honored your own self-worth. That action alone requires immense courage and represents massive emotional growth.
It really does. And let's pull this all the way back to the beginning, to the self-expansion model we discussed earlier. The theory that we fall in love because we possess a fundamental drive to expand our own identity by incorporating the traits and life of another person.
Right.
If that is true, it reframes the pain of unrequited love entirely.
How so?
When you are rejected, you are not just mourning the loss of the other person. You are mourning the expanded version of yourself that you thought you were about to become.
Oh, wow.
You are grieving the future identity you had already started constructing in your mind. The pain is a symptom of your own thwarted growth.
That is deep.
So I will leave you with this thought to mull over. If your underlying goal is expansion, if your brain is craving a larger, more complex version of your life, how can you facilitate that expansion today?
Yeah.
What new trait, hobby, or worldview can you adopt right now entirely on your own without waiting for someone else to be the catalyst?
You felt the ping. You took the risk. Whatever happens next, you're already stepping into a bigger version of yourself.